The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We are not going to use the entire hour, so we have some minutes, and we will use it to let other people come in. We will start probably in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Okay, time to start. So first of all, welcome everyone to this webinar. My name is Luca De Loca, and I'm Principal Cloud Architect at Veeam. And today we're going to talk about Veeam Backup Replication version 12 and its enhanced security and scalability options thanks to object storage secure mode. A couple of logistics information for you. The webinar is recorded and we will share the recording after the event. If you want to interact with us, and we'd love to, please use the questions box. While I'm presenting, my colleagues will help you to receive information about every question you have, and we will also have a QA time at the end of the presentation. And after this, let's start with the presentation. First, I need to give you a little bit of slang that we're going to use in the presentation. We have some acronyms because otherwise it wouldn't be an IT presentation if we don't have. So we will talk today about object storage. This is the main topic of today, related to Veeam Backup Replication, so our VBR machine. We will talk about how to use the object storage in both Veeam Backup Replication Server or in Veeam Cloud Connect. And we will also talk about how to do direct to object, which you will see later what it is. To do this, we will also talk about some cloud-specific information, like, for example, identity and access management option we have. With this, let's set the stage. So why do we need secure mode and what secure mode is? The starting point is that thanks to the announcement of Cloud Connect and the support for agent, since the beginning, the idea of backing up a multitude of remote agents has always been a fascinating idea. You can deploy Cloud Connect, you can deploy hundreds or even thousands of agents remotely, and you can receive all the data of these agents. Think about laptops, think about all the different companies with desktops. It's been a really cool idea, but scaling has always been a challenge for this type of design because of the way that the traffic is managed in Cloud Connect. But now, thanks to the arrival of Veeam Backup Replication version 12 and the option to do direct to object backup, which is the agent can send data directly into the object storage without passing through the gateways, this scenario has become not just possible, but full of a very huge potential. Because if you think about the capability and the scaling that an object storage has, this can be inherited by Veeam and allow to receive all this amount of data coming from all the remote agents. because we believe that object storage is ready for prime time, and we believe this is the right time to start thinking about it. We're not saying you're going to switch all of a sudden to object storage, because we want to maximize the investments and the life cycle of your existing storage. So if you have block storage in Cloud Connect or VBR, you keep using it until it's time to refresh the hardware you have. Maybe because it's on a lease for 5 years, maybe because there is a new technology out. But if at any point there is a new project, a new branch, a new design that you want to do, probably you should consider now to start using object storage as a new solution. So this gives you the option to start slowly, understand how the object storage is used in Veeam, and adopt it in a managed way. So you can go it and fit your need. You can learn little by little, and then be ready to use it whenever you want. And remember, we will not take block storage away. It's not the topic of today, but block storage is not going away at any time. So we talked about the secure mode and the object storage usage. And there is obviously a trade between scalability and security, because yes, scalability is a huge advantage of object storage because it's almost perfect for managing a multitude of sources. You just expose a URL, you give it to every agent, and every agent sends data to the URL. But what about multi-tenancy? If I'm sharing the same bucket to my tenants, are they secure? Because it's like putting all the eggs in one basket, right? So maybe some people are confused because, yeah, the idea of doing this design is cool, but what about the security and the multi-tenancy, which is a paramount characteristic that every design for service provider has to have. And this is where secure mode comes into play, because secure mode leverages the object storage native permissions to let agent write into the same bucket of every other agent, and at the same time guaranteeing access only to their own written data. So you heard about this secure mode, but there is a point in Veeam. We have multiple modes to consume object storage, and I'm going to give you an overview. So this is the full spectrum. Don't get scared, because this is just to show you that we have multiple options that you can configure. So you have freedom to decide which one you need. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of these. So let's start about, public cloud storage. Some end user and also some service provider may want to use the object storage not running as hardware in their own premises, but they want to consume public cloud storage, say AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. Now, the idea is, do you want to give them to the agent direct access, which means the agent are going to write directly into the object storage using the URL, or you want to design a gated access, which means data is coming in before into Cloud Connect, and then data is sent to the object storage. The main difference here is to the authorization process. You will see some information below here. So the authorization means who is responsible for identifying and authorizing the agent coming in. When we use gated access, the Cloud Connect server is the one authenticating every agent and authorizing access to the storage. And then, if you look at the backup traffic, which is the backup listed here, it goes from the agent to the Cloud Connect gateway, to the object storage gateway, to the object storage. If we want to do direct access, the two main differences are that the authorization is done by the public cloud directly. And we will see later how this happens. And the backup traffic is heavily simplified because the agent sends data directly to the object storage. So if you imagine the three different sites, like the service provider with Cloud Connect, the public object storage, and the agent, the traffic of the agent doesn't go to the Cloud Connect, but it goes directly to the object storage. What is left, and you see in the middle, the control traffic, that one always goes from the agent to the Cloud Connect environment and to the Cloud Connect server. So the main advantage of this design, you already seen here, is that we are separating the backup traffic from the control traffic. The control traffic is a low bandwidth traffic and is totally managed by Cloud Connect, but the high traffic coming from the agent to the object storage goes straight, if you want, to the object storage. And that's why we can say that we can increase the performance and the amount of agent that we can manage with this design, because the Cloud Connect server doesn't have to bear all the load of the traffic coming in. But now I can already hear many service providers that say, we don't want to use a public cloud storage. We want to use our own storage, any S3 compatible storage. Totally doable. It can also be a third-party public storage. We know, other services like Wasabi, for example, is a good example. It's not one of the three, is S3 compatible, but is consumed as a service from the public internet. Again, the main design here is, okay, I got my S3 storage. How do I want to give direct access to my storage? I can still say no, because I'm already still using the same design that is done for block storage, for example, right? Where all the traffic comes in from the cloud gateways of Cloud Connect. In this case, we call it secure indirect access, and it works like Cloud Connect today. So authorization is done by Cloud Connect server. The control plane is always the same in any case, and the backup flows as the gated access we explained before. The other option is, yes, I want to give access directly to my object storage, to my agent. To do so, I need to check one thing, that is, if my storage solution supports temporary credential. And stay with me for a while, I will explain what this temporary credential is. But mainly, the idea is, if the storage doesn't support this temporary credential, we fall into the middle design, which is insecure direct access, which means every agent writing into the bucket authenticate with the main key that allows access to the bucket. And so everybody sees the data written by every agent. It's like a huge box that we said before, where everybody throws the backup in and everybody reads the same data. If the storage supports these temporary credentials, we can go for secure direct access, which is the main topic of today, where the authentication is done directly by the object storage. And so every agent can write directly to the object storage in a secure way, because the permissions are going to split all the data, even if they're written into the same bucket. And as I said, this option is not exclusive to the public cloud. The feature you're going to look for if you're using an S3 storage is called STS, and it's part of the IAM API set of Amazon, but also because it's a public set of API, every storage that uses S3 as a protocol can possibly have it. Many storage vendors do it. They are already available as of today in Minio, for example. Scalability has it. Many other vendors are adding it, so probably this list is already outdated by today. And other public vendor like Wasabi, for example, supports STS. So if you want to check with your actual vendor and you want to use this feature, ask, do you support STS in your storage? That's it. How do we consume it is the topic of the next part of the presentation. So how do we set up this configuration? First, we need to go direct. And this is the main point. When you install and register a new object storage repository in Veeam, in V12, there is a new option in this step of the wizard that says connection mode, and you need to select direct. So we got the usual connection mode, which is through the gateway server, as it always been so far. So VBR manages the access to the repository through a gateway. So one of the managed servers that you enable to be the one writing to the bucket. Or we go direct, which means every source data mover, being the proxies for VBR, the repository, if it's a backup copy, or the remote agents, are going to write directly into the object storage. This is the premise. This is the first step we need to do in the design. Okay, so we go here, we say choose, and we choose the direct mode. Okay, so it's not through a gateway server anymore. We choose the direct option. Once we have done this, we are going to be in kind of scenario like this. So we got all our remote agents, we got our Cloud Connect environment, and we have the object storage where we already created an S3 bucket. We explained before the management traffic is going through Cloud Connect. The backup traffic is going to be direct to object from the agent to the S3 bucket. What do we do here? So the service provider creates the new bucket with the user that has full permission. You will receive the access key and the secret key pair, and those are the credentials that are registered into the Veeam server to connect to the object storage and register the bucket as a new repository. For the new repository, we register in direct mode, and we go and configure secure mode. How do we do secure mode? Okay, we register the bucket here. We look to it, right-click, and we select access permissions. In access permission, we're going to see 3 access control mode. The first one is what we called before insecure direct. So every agent shares the credential with the other agent when writing to the object storage. The second option is the secure indirect access. That is, data goes through the gateway server. And we have the third option, which is the security is provided by EIM/STS storage capability. STS is, as I say, this security token service available in the API, which is a subset of the identity and access management system of S3. What we do here is we insert the 2 URL endpoint, which are always available from the storage. So in my case, I'm using a scalability machine. The URL is going to be different in any case, but you see the point. You receive the URL from the storage, you put it here. And what is going to happen after this configuration is that the service provider obviously first assigns the object storage repository as the target of a new backup policy, either in service provider console or directly into Cloud Connect. You define a tenant and you give backup resources to the tenant, and you create the cloud repository on top of the object storage. The policy is obviously sent to the agent. Either it's a new agent which is discovered, or it's an existing agent that received an update in the policy. What is happening is that the agent will rescan the service provider, and the object storage will appear in the console of the agent as the backup target. This is the configuration. You've seen here, and this is a key point, we didn't create any user. You will see later why. So let's start the first backup. Same situation as before, already configured. The first backup is going to happen now. So the remote agent connect to the Cloud Connect server to retrieve the credential for accessing the S3 bucket. Cloud Connect checks that this is the first time the agent is connecting, so we need to create the credential. But instead of using the main credential, so the access key and the secret key, Cloud Connect is going to connect to the EM service of the object storage and create a new set of credentials with these STS keys. The key is going to be passed to the agent, and the agent will connect to the S3 bucket using the temporary key, and we will start the backup session. Each agent, as before, is going to be stored into a subfolder of the bucket, and permissions will be applied to each folder so that only the agent key will allow the agent to access that folder. No agent will be able to open the folder of a different agent. Only the master key, which is owned by the service provider and never passed to the agent, will be able to see the entire content of the bucket. Okay. So back to the question we did before, scalability and security at the same time? Yes, because what we can do here is an automatic multi-tenancy. We only create one main user, and then every agent user is created on the fly using the STS API for each agent. We don't need to manage them. And so we can guarantee the scalability because we're using direct access to the object storage, removing any bottleneck created by the Veeam gateways. And at the same time, we can guarantee automatic multi-tenancy because each agent is isolated without any need to create manually any account. I know some people want to see how this happens, so let me show you. This is the user list in my storage system. The first user is the one that owns the access ID and the secret ID pair that is created when we create the bucket. And this is the one registered into the Veeam VPR machine. You see also the dates. There are 2 months difference between the two. The second user is created by VBR using its access ID and secret ID to connect to the EM service. And the EM service creates this user the first time the agent has connected to the VBR machine. We didn't create this user. You also recognize, because of the name, that says VBR service account dash a random ID created on the fly. This is only one user. If you have 1,000 agents, you will see 1,000 of these users. For each of these users, you see there is an access key. The access key of the main user never expires. The second one is refreshed automatically over time. And I will give you an explanation of how this works. So let's geek out a little bit. I know many people want to see the detail of this thing, and we're going to explain you how does it work in detail. Let's take the example of AWS. Azure and Google Cloud is a little bit different, but we'll see later. So the first step, obviously, is to create the user. How do we create a user, or better say, in which situation we create a user? If we are managing agent into a backup replication machine, we create a user for each agent. So imagine you're doing private cloud or a IaaS environment, whatever you want to call it. We have Veeam Backup Replication machine, and we have all the agents connected and managed by VBR. Each of these agents will receive its own user and its own STS key. In Cloud Connect use case, we create a user for each subtenant. which is obviously every agent that is connected remotely to Cloud Connect. If instead we are doing this for a Veeam Backup Replication, remotely sending data to Cloud Connect, there will be one temporary credential for the entire backup replication server. We don't furtherly split permission because the premise should be that all virtual machine belonging to a remote VBR probably belongs to the same user. And so there is no need to split permission into this. You see here in my console that I'm into the EAM service of AWS. I didn't create this user. This user has been created by the EIM interaction. For further identification, you see that we have an additional tag that says this is a Veeam account. So in case you need to go into AWS and identify all the users created by Veeam for cleaning or for any reason, you can easily spot them by filtering the tagging that we do. Then what we do here is we assign a policy to this user we created. We use the inline policies mechanism. This is a AWS technicality. You don't need to know it. The point is, you see here, there are three main policies. The general one, the read-only policy, and the read-write policy applied to the key. So the user is able to read the data and read and write the data. And then we add permission to the policy. Otherwise, obviously, it's going to be an empty policy. And here you see the key for this to work. This is a simple access policy, read-write policy to an S3 bucket. You see in the action that we can retrieve and list the S3 content, and we are authorized to put new object and delete object, so read and write and delete. The key point is that the resources this policy is authorized to access is not the entire bucket, but is just a folder of the bucket. Because if you read the URL, the starting point is vat/bucket, /bucket/veeam/backup. This is the starting point. But then, because this is Cloud Connect, we see the name of the tenant /clients / the UUID of the agent. And then there is the asterisk, which is inside this folder, this permission allows to read and write everything. So you see where we declare that whoever received this policy is only authorized to read and write inside that subfolder and not into the entire bucket. I hope this is all clear, because this is the key point of the entire thing. In Azure, it's a little bit different. We did a joke internally because basically in Azure, you don't configure any user, no policies, no permission, so there is no complication. So, okay, this is just a joke, but the point is the way that it works in Azure is that the permission are managed using what it's called in Azure shared access signature. There is a link here if you want to go deeper into understanding how does it work. The point is that everything is organized via private link. Every agent receives a unique link to access the data. The link expires over time, so there is no risk to somebody getting the link and be able to access the resources. And you see here, the storage resource URI is the first part of the URL. From the question mark on, this is the SAS token. So it's a comparable situation as before with AWS, but instead of the token being passed as a credential to access the same URL, the token is inside the URL. Okay. In Google, it's a little bit different, but it's very similar to AWS. So what we do here is, again, we create the user inside the Veeam service as in AWS. Each user is also tagged as Veeam account as before, so you can go and search it. The changes here is that the policy is not assigned to the user, but it's assigned to the bucket. But don't worry, it's not that every user accessing the same bucket is going to have the same policy, because the policy already states that every user is going to have dedicated access to the bucket. Okay? So different configuration, same result. Okay? You can notice that we didn't talk about S3, so the on-prem storage, because the way that it works is exactly like it's explained for AWS, because every private storage uses the same technology as AWS S3. So in the case of the private storage, we're going to use the S3 STS tokens, and the object storage is going to pass these tokens to the Veeam server and from here to the agent. Okay, some important information to know to use this solution. It's not an any-to-any mapping in the ways you can use this solution. So if you want to use VBR server, every storage is supported. So you can use AWS or S3 compatible, Azure Blob, Google Cloud Storage. If you want to apply immutability, because we didn't talk about this specifically, but immutability is totally supported in this design. So all the S3 object lock or the Azure object lock works. It doesn't work for Google Cloud Storage because there is no object lock feature in Google Cloud Storage. You can set immutability at the bucket level, but this is not the way that it works in Veeam. For Cloud Connect, same as an on-prem design, we can do Cloud Connect consuming any of these storage resources. One point of attention, you see here in the note, if you want to use Cloud Connect consuming Google Cloud Storage, it works in direct mode, but we need to create an helper appliance and configure additional credential to use it. This is a configuration that is well explained in our Help Center guide. If you want to do Cloud Connect plus immutability, you basically have one choice, which is S3 protocol. Cloud Connect immutability doesn't work in Azure, even if we support immutability when it's done through VBR. And Google, as we said before, doesn't have any immutability feature at the moment. Another point of attention, compatibility. Obviously, this solution is very cool, but remember, this is a new V12 feature, and as such, only the new version of the software can consume this solution. So you need to have V12 as the receiving target, but you also need to have V12 as the source. So the sources that can consume secure mode are Veeam Backup Replication version 12 and the new agent. So agent for Microsoft Windows 6.0, agent for Linux 6.0, and Mac 2.0. So in case, for example, you're running Cloud Connect and you still have older customer using version 11, version 12 of the software, you can create, obviously, buckets that are consuming object storage, but you cannot expose them to customers who are using older version of the software. Direct mode and secure mode works only if also the source is using one of those versions. Other notes, Cloud Connect insider protection. I know it's been a huge feature in the past to guarantee protection of the data stored into Cloud Connect. It doesn't work with object storage if you assign it as a cloud repository. Regardless if you're talking about secure mode or direct mode, insider protection doesn't work if you're using object storage. The point for us is that there is another option, which in my opinion is even better, which is to use the native immutability of S3 via object lock. It gives you the same result because you store data and it cannot be deleted. And it also has some additional benefit. The main one being that the files are always visible and ready to be used for restore, even if when they're locked. While in the insider protection, the files are moved into a different folder, and so they disappear from the list of the file visible by the customer. Another note of attention for Google, we said before, is mandatory to configure the specific helper appliance. Otherwise, the customer will not be able to use the Google Cloud Storage for agent jobs. If you want to see how to configure this, there is a specific section in our user guide that explains how to do so. You get the link here. You can go and search in the user guide for this. Okay. Other information. So we talked a lot about these keys and the fact that the keys are created from the object storage, stored into VBR, and passed to the agent. But what about protecting these keys? And there are some important information you need to know. First, if you're using Cloud Connect, the agents do not store the STS keys, never. They receive the key from the Cloud Connect server every time they initiate a session. The agent only store the tenant credential, which are the one needed to connect initially to Cloud Connect. Instead, if you're using VBR server, so the agent managed by VBR, the agent, can back up to object storage even without a connection to VBR, and so they store the credential. Okay? If you look at the statement I just did about Cloud Connect, there is one important consideration to do, which is the availability of Cloud Connect server. Cloud Connect server is an absolutely needed component of the solution. Just because the STS keys are sent to agent at every session, there is no operation possible by the agent if the server is unreachable, because the keys are never stored on the agent. So we need to be sure that if we need to do this design, the Cloud Connect server is up and running at all time to guarantee secure mode to work. Okay. I know we have thrown a lot of information into this webinar in just a little bit more than half an hour. If you want to have even more information, design consideration, points of attention, detail, for example, of the XML policies you need to create in the storage to configure secure mode, I just wrote and published a white paper. You can get it into the link, and the link is also available in this QR code if you want to take a picture of it. And with this, we have concluded the presentation. I will leave this page here so you get time to sign down the link or take the QR code, and maybe we can have a look at the question box. I didn't check during the presentation, but I know that Alexander was working here in the background, and I also want to thank Alexander for the work while I was presenting. So
you're welcome. I think I answered all of them.
Good. Is there any maybe? Oh, yeah. Good. So we don't have any on left one. Maybe you do have.
There's one very interesting question. A little bit side topic, but somebody asked if a tenant sending backups to object storage, whether they are know about this, or because it can be obviously go to public cloud storage and they may be subject to particular data regulations. So the question is, is the tenant aware of this fact?
Well, what the tenant knows is the URL of the bucket they are sending data to, because it totally shows up like a public URL. In my example, obviously, I had my own lab URL, which is .local domain. In the case of public cloud storage, or even the compatible S3 storage used by a provider, obviously, you need to expose it with a public URL. Otherwise, people will not be able to resolve the URL. And that URL is sent to the agent, so the agent can totally see the URL where the data is going to be sent to. To know if that URL is in your own country or outside EMEA, for example, for GDPR or other things, is not an option we do have in the software. But what you can do, well, obviously, if you're buying the storage from a private service provider, you just ask the service provider the location of the object storage. For a public cloud, usually every URL into AWS shows the data center or the region where or every other vendor, also Azure. So there is no automatic way, but because the URL is visible, I believe you can go and check where this data center is totally. Oh, I see some other new questions pop up in the meantime. Oh, do you support archive tier? No, for this, but what you can do is to use public archive tier for doing the second tier for the object storage. So one of these two supported ones, so the Google one and the Azure one, because in that case, you probably already know, if you know about archive tier, we need to deploy a dedicated virtual machine to do the data conversion. So in that two cases, yes. Regardless of tenant, then see one for Lasse, let me read it. Regardless of the tenant being aware there are still subs 20. Yeah, correct, Lasse. I mean, as a customer, you should probably check all the legislation that is relevant to you and take the decision accordingly. Agree. You mentioned Wasabi. How does it compare to AWS and others? Well, probably this is a little bit of topic, but I mean, Wasabi is a very good public S3 storage provider. Compared to AWS, they don't have all the other offer because they focus on storage. They have some pros and cons, but it's a good solution if you want to use it. I wouldn't go deeper into any comparison. And then Cedric says, immutability or insider protection. Using sober. Good point. Well, if you're still using sober for block storage or even with object storage, because you can still expose object storage as part of the sober in the gated option we said before, my personal opinion would be to use immutability rather than insider protection. Because even if you think about, it's a little bit off topic, but I mean, it's a good point. Even if you're using Linux hardened repository as a block storage for receiving backup for Cloud Connect, the great advantage of immutability is that as I said before, the backup files are visible all the time. They don't disappear because they go into the dedicated recycle bin. And the other point is the protection works if you configure the job for recurring active faults, because you need to split the chain. Otherwise, for example, the single full file of a forever incremental chain will never move to the recycle bin. While if you use immutability, every new file is already marked as immutable and store where is it. So my personal opinion is that you should go for immutability if you can. So Linux hardened repository or S3 object lock, now that you can use direct mode, in my opinion, is preferable to insider protection. Okay. I don't see any other question. So if there is anything anymore, I think it's time to say goodbye. So thanks everybody for joining. I hope this session has been informative and good for you. And thanks again from me and from all the team that worked with me for the webinar. And see you next time. Bye-bye.